Now, if I asked you to pick between these two boots, most people would just pick whichever one they liked better. But if I added in this one piece of information where this boot will increase your risk of injury by 30% every single time you wear them, that would make the choice a little bit more tricky. And it's exactly that topic that I want to discuss in this video because I really feel like it's the most undervalued aspect of football boots in general. People like to focus on the marketing and the technology and the looks and the colors and stuff that is definitely important, but the number one most important thing when it comes to buying a pair of football boots is the way that your boots interact with the playing surface. Hey man, what's up? Not much. Now, I've gone on several rants on this channel and on the internet in general talking about stud patterns, more specifically AG stud patterns, which are designed for use on artificial grass, not only to provide optimal traction, but also to provide an amount of traction that is not increasing your risk of injury. Because while this sounds maybe a little bit weird, if you have too much traction, that will increase your risk of injury. In other words, slipping, or at least being able to slip, can actually save you from some pretty nasty injuries. But AG stud patterns in general are pretty self-explanatory. If you play on artificial grass and you buy an AG stud pattern, you've pretty much done the right thing. However, there's something called FG AG stud patterns on the market, which is a stud pattern and a sole plate that supposedly is suitable for use on firm natural grass as well as artificial grass, two surfaces that are very different from each other. FGAG stud patterns being a very common thing within the Adidas and Puma brands, although credit to Adidas, they're not technically labeling their boots as FGAG anymore, but it is implied that you can wear them on both natural and artificial surfaces. The question is FGAG too good to be true? Or more importantly, is it actually safe? Now, I'm sure at this point we've all done it, worn an FG boot on artificial grass, and there's probably some crazy people out there that have even worn soft ground boots on artificial grass, which goes without saying, you should never do that. There are even pros that wear FG boots on artificial grass, which is something that I still don't understand given that clubs are paying these players tons and tons of money to not be injured and perform at their best, so having them wear FG stud patterns on artificial grass and increasing their risk of injury seems absolutely ridiculous to me, but that's a whole other story for a whole nother video. Either way, the question is, are you actually safe to wear FGAG stud patterns on artificial grass? Because if you're wearing them on firm ground, pretty much any stud pattern will do. Natural grass is a very forgiving playing surface, where artificial grass pretty much clings to anything, and again, the danger comes when you have too much grip. My main issue with FGAG stud patterns, including every single one that's currently available, is the fact that it's clearly designed as an FG stud pattern, and the only thing that's AG about it is the fact that they're telling you that you can wear it on artificial grass. Other than that, there's really nothing about this that is AG specific or geared towards being used on AG. But is it unsafe? Well, if we look at this X stud pattern as an example, typically what I would deem to be unsafe for use on artificial grass is something with a bladed stud pattern. And you can see in the heel, the studs are pretty round. Not perfectly round, but rounded off. So you're not gonna have much cling from that. As far as what's happening in the forefoot, you have kind of these chevron, triangular shaped, but not quite sharp bladed studs. And this is a stud pattern that I have personally used on artificial grass many times, and it doesn't feel too clingy in my opinion. However, there is definitely more cling to this than what you'd find from an AG specific stud pattern. So while I can't say with 100% certainty that this is unsafe to wear on artificial grass, because I don't think that at all, I definitely think that this is more unsafe for use on artificial grass, meaning that it increases your risk of injury versus an AG specific stud pattern like I have here on this Mercurial. Speaking of Mercurials, here's an FG stud pattern on a Vapor 13, which features all bladed chevron studs, the most aggressive stud pattern on the market that works extremely well on natural grass. And I'm sure there's people watching this video even that have worn this stud pattern on artificial grass as well. And I'm sure you've noted that the traction is very, very good. And that's mainly because artificial grass clings to just about anything. The issue with this stud pattern and what makes it so unsafe on artificial grass is that there's just way too much grip and you have an inability to twist and pivot. When you plant your foot, it is pretty much stuck. So while you might not get hurt the instant that you start running, your increased risk of injury is pretty significant given the circumstances of how this football boot interacts with an artificial grass surface. As a general rule, I would strongly advise against wearing any stud pattern, FG or not, with bladed studs on artificial grass. Here's an FG-AG stud pattern from Puma, this being on the Future 5.1, and you'll notice that there are some bladed studs incorporated into this stud pattern, but they're in more support areas rather than kind of key push-off points where you're going to have that cling. So I wouldn't say that these are necessarily unsafe. All of the main studs are conical in shape, which means that even on artificial grass, you're not gonna have any kind of excessive cling. The one thing I will say about this stud pattern is that while it's technically FG-AG, great on firm natural grass, the studs are quite long. So on most AG surfaces that I've used this stud pattern on, the studs are just a little bit too long, which long term can result in issues with stud pressure. And in general, because the studs aren't able to dig in as deep as they're supposed to, you do end up with some issues in regards to instability. So again, it is technically FG-AG, and I think it is safe to use on artificial grass, but is it as safe as a true AG stud pattern? Definitely not. So I guess my point here is that you shouldn't undervalue the importance of how your football boot interacts with the playing surface, because there are so many people, pros included, that are putting themselves at a higher risk of injury for no reason at all. Attention to detail is something that's often discussed in regards to the difference between a very good player and an elite pro athlete. And I feel like football boots, specifically stud patterns, is another one of those small details that might not make a difference for years and years and years of you wearing those boots, but the one time that you do get injured, it perhaps could have been avoided if you were just wearing the proper stud pattern, or at least a stud pattern that was better suited for the surface that you're wearing them on. And for those that will ask if there's a good example of an actual FG-AG stud pattern out there, there's really only one that comes to mind, and that was the stud pattern featured on the Adidas Ace 15.1 from a couple years ago. All conical studs, a little bit shorter in length, not necessarily the best traction on firm natural grass, but definitely very good traction on AG, but at the same time, very safe to wear and not overly clingy. If you're only gonna buy one pair of boots to wear on natural grass and artificial grass playing surfaces, I would strongly recommend something from the AG Pro line that Nike has on offer, or at the very least, an FG stud pattern that features all conical studs. Anyways, guys, that's it for this mini rant slash lecture. Hopefully you learned something that will help you in picking out your next pair of football boots, regardless of what playing surface you're going to be using them on. If you guys enjoyed this video, found it helpful and informative, please support it with a like. That helps me out tremendously, and perhaps share this with a friend who perhaps would find this information useful. If you have any questions or require any clarification on something that I talked about in this video, leave it down below in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. If you're not subscribed already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss the next upload. All of my social media information is linked down below as well, so follow me in those places if you don't already. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.